thank Jan and Jerry Grady again for the wonderful refreshments that they have, as well as the decorations. And I would like now to thank Steve Lohman, our son, who has really been beneficial in putting all of this together. Please take a look at the maps and make sure you have a handout. And I'd like to thank Jeff Auk, our city manager, who is going to be one of the presenters this evening as we head up toward the mausoleum. I mean, not the mausoleum, but the
storage vault.
Storage vault. And Barb Bro, who is one of our presenters, and of course, Tom Woolman. So please help me welcome them all, and be sure to say thank you to them.
So first, if you have not signed in, please do so. And again, I've told everybody, I think that your handout does not include all the information that is going to be up on the website, and that will probably be put up either tomorrow or the next day. And if you didn't get that information, see me afterwards. When we get done with the walk, we are going to be at the mausoleum, but we're going to come back here for refreshments. So as we're going through the walk, please think about some things as we're going through here. Who maintains the graves? And how do they maintain the graves? If you're going to weed whip around the graves, what happens to styrofoam flowers around the weed whipper? They don't last too long. In the last several years, and we'll talk about this when we get to the vault, but in the last several years, there has also been some winter burials. There has not been any burials that they've held over. What they do is they scrape the snow off, they'll put some de-icer down, and they'll actually bury the person, not anymore person, but they'll bury the body even during the winter. Some places you might find some little coins or stones. That means that somebody has visited there and left the momentum that they've been there. And as we're going through there, we are going to give you some directions to which way we're going to go. We'll do that. I already talked about refreshments. We have a lot to cover tonight, but we'll wait till everybody gets in the group so that we can, at least everybody can hear that. And if you have some questions and answers, we kind of welcome them as we're going. But if you would like to hold the questions till we get back here to have refreshments, that would probably be a good time for that. There is a big map on the table, and I mentioned to you that you might want to look at that map. It's an old map, and there's 3 unusual things. We'll point that out, the 3 unusual things, when we get to about 3/4 of the way through here. At one time, this place that we're standing was the township of Montague, and it was not. And then the village of Montague was also here. It was used as a burial back to 1856, and it wasn't really recognized until the 1870s that it was a burial. The land was bought from Henry Staples, and in October of 1877, 1878, they officially took the land and they surveyed it for this cemetery. It was known first as the Montague Cemetery, and then the name was changed to the Oak Grove Cemetery. There is going to be an oldest tombstone, and we'll visit that oldest tombstone. It is by Frank Murden. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. In 1910, the ladies decided that they would put together a group, and they called their group the Cemetery Improvement Association Group. One of the first things they wanted to do was to get water to the graves so that they could make the cemetery look a little bit better. They didn't know whether they were going to hook up to the city water or the village water at that time, or whether they would put their own pump down, and they decided they'd buy a gasoline engine and put their own pump down. An auction was held, and a lot of material was given by Mrs. Dowling. They raised $150. That doesn't sound like much today, but back in those days, the auction went really slow, and they were very pleased with that much money. And with that, they put in 2,100 feet of piping so that people could water the sites. They decided at that time that the water would be free for everybody to use, and what they did was they ran the pump from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and so people could have water to use. A few years later, they decided they were going to beautify it, so they put some hyacinths in and some narcissus and some tulips, and they wanted to do that, and they got it ready for Decoration Day. At that time, they decided that they would, if you're over on Dowling, they decided that they would build a building, and they call it the Vault, and we'll talk about that later when we get up to one of the sites, but the Vault is still there. It's been repaired a little bit, needs a little bit more money. But what they would do with the Vault is they would temporarily store bodies in there during the winter for burial. In 1959, I'm not sure which group, but they voted, the Montague City Council, I do know which group, they voted to put a mausoleum together. And at first they decided they were going to have 72 sites. There was so much interest in that they decided that they would add 32, so there's 108 sites altogether. And the sale of those sites paid for that mausoleum. Inside your handout, you're going to have a bunch of symbols. Some of those symbols we're going to see tonight. And again, we're going to give you a lot more information than what's in your handout. All the people that we're going to visit, I shouldn't say people, all the graves we're going to visit are in your handout except for one. And I'll point that out and I'll explain why that is not in there more. If you look in there, there will also be a website, Find a Grave. And that website is where a lot of this information that we found tonight came from. So, at this time, our first site is right over here. If you see a flag, an orange flag, I believe it's behind the tree for me. It's right over there. Oh, right over here in front of us. So if we go over there and we gather around that, we'll start our tour.
Scott Elijah Kruger was born in September of 2005 to Alicia and Scott Kruger. He lived in Twin Lake with his parents, a sister, and sadly passed away in February of 2006. He's survived by his parents, a sister, grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and several great aunts and great uncles. Scott Elijah Kruger. This is Edith Clark Prindaville, and she died in 1923. I thought this was an interesting headstone because it's a big rock, and if you come on this side, you'll see that it's somehow or other they managed to etch her name and her date in it. Sometimes people, some of the that I've seen in my family from Indiana, they just take cement, put it, like ready mix, and they put shells and wood and whatever in it and carve the name in with a stick. But this is a little better done than that.
Concrete doesn't last very well.
No.
So Edith was born in Canada, and she came to United States around 1911. She spent a lot of summers here, and then for the last few years, I'm going to not call it of her life, but I guess I could of her life, she lived here a summer long. One day she was going to go to visit somebody. She got out in her car, and the person that was staying with her, Florence Cockrell, went out to check with her, and she was laying alongside of the car, and she died again, as Barb had said, in 1923. There's some other things that you might want to mention. We might want to mention here, and we look through here, look at the different types of stone, whether they're granite or whether they're stone. We'll see some that are bronze, we'll see some that are marble as we go through here. But there's something else about this area. If you look behind there, there's not much in that little area right there. That's called the Potter's Field. And if somebody dies and they have nobody to take care of them, then the state will take care of the body. And Steve, you want to add anything to that?
It's pretty much, you don't really see any headstones. There's only a few headstones that actually did make it out here in the Potter's Field area, which would be these four right here. But there are, I would say, maybe 50 to 60 burials from that oak tree going towards the road.
Wow.
And the other thing that's interesting about this area, it's right over in there, if I'm getting this correctly.
Yes, right over here is the baby land.
Baby land area, okay? So again, as we go through here, if you got any questions, feel free to interrupt me, but or otherwise we will head towards the next one.
Why is this area kind of marked out with cement blocks, and then there's a letter C or something at this point too?
That would be the block corners. That kind of signifies the territory that the family had bought when they bought it years and years ago.
Okay, thanks.
So if you look at the website, Find a Grave, you'll find different blocks, and inside that block there'll be different sites in there. Most of them have 8 different sites in a block.
In a block?
Or 16.
There's anywhere from 4.
Okay, so nothing's
It goes from blocks to lot to plot.
nothing's standard. You want to say his name?
Yeah. This is Daniel Rand Calkins.
Okay. So back in the 1890s, there was a group called the Woodsmen of the World.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. They wanted to make life insurance affordable for everybody, and what they did was, if you bought some life insurance from them, it included a tomb, or a tombstone, I should say. For some of them, it looked like a tree stump, and I don't know if we have any out here, but there's also some places where it might look like 3 logs that would be more like for some kids. There's a variety of symbols on here. It could be an axe, it could be a maul, it could be other woodworking equipment, even a dove, which would, if you look at your thing, just kind of means peace. In the 1900s, or up to 1910, the insurance company decided, hey, we can't afford to get tombstones like this for any more, so we're going to have to put a $100 rider on your insurance. And you could still order that. After 1920, they decided that wasn't going to be any more, so Barb's found some more information so that you could still get a tombstone from somebody that you very well know.
Actually, there was kind of a little overlap. Starting in 1902, Sears Roebuck and Company had a catalog that had memorial art in granite and marble. And you could select different tombstones. There were the tree ones, and then there were some of the regular ones that you have. And a 4-foot tree stone went for as little as $28.75 plus 6 cents per character, engraving the name and the date. It was shipped from Vermont and would arrive in 4 to 6 weeks. And the way that it was transported was by rail. Sears Roebuck stopped selling the headstones and monuments in 1993.
That was a long time.
Can you get them on
I don't
Amazon?
think this is a Normally, there was normally a marker, like either in some kind of distinguishing mark that either said wow or it said Woodman of the World. So I think perhaps this one might have come from Sears Roebuck.
So again, this is Daniel Calkins. He was born in 1837 in New York. He married Esther in 1868. They became to this area and they became respected citizens of the area and had a big fruit farm. I'm not sure where Terrace Hill is, but it was around Terrace Hill. And after they came to this village, Esther became part of the members of the Montague M.E. Church.
Methodist Episcopal.
Methodist Episcopal Church. And so next, we're going to go to that big monument that's over there by that tree.
Mayor Lohman,
Yes, sir.
since we're here, this is not in your pamphlet, but I did want to point out Ivers Calkins' gravesite right here. He's kind of, if you were ever look up Find the Grave, he's considered to be somebody famous in the cemetery. So if you can take a look at his veteran plaque here, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for, I believe he captured the Confederate flag in a battle in Virginia.
Very cool.
Okay, so we're heading towards that big monument that's right up there. Again, we have a marker beside it. Go ahead, Barb, you can mention his name.
This is Malcolm Hendry. He was the owner of the Montague Iron Works Company.
So Malcolm Henry was born in Scotland in 1844, and he came to this country 20 years later. He married Mary in New York, and they came to Montague, and as Bard said, they established the Montague Iron Works. I don't know, is that tombstone iron? I don't think so. Mary was born in Scotland, and she died in Grand Rapids. But there's something we need to talk about with this tombstone. For most of the most of the maintenance is supposed to be done by the family, unless there's no family around. But there's something unusual with this tombstone in that it needs to be repaired. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to bring a crane in, and I don't know if they can pick it up in one piece or several pieces, and they're going to have to take it apart and put a new foundation underneath. And I believe the cost is going to be
Probably about $3,000,
Okay.
$4,000.
just for maintaining that.
The crane truck, just for one visit, is going to be about $2,000.
And it sounds like the crane truck again will have to be here all day long.
Do we know what that insignia is?
I do not. Maybe you do, Barb?
What's that?
What's the insignia?
Memphis. An Hawk signal Memphis. Probably Latin.
I don't know.
Tom, I'd like to point something out over here. There's a connection here between Hendry and then that's Cassis Dowling, and this is Marjorie DeWitt, Marjorie Dowling DeWitt. And somehow there's a connection here, like somebody married the widow or whatever kind of thing.
Okay, very good.
Marjorie DeWitt there,
All right.
for those who had her kindergarten.
Here we have the grave of Job Sargent.
So Job was born in 1794 in New Hampshire, and he served in the War of 1812. He came to this Whitelake area and was granted a large property for some homestead, which he built a log cabin and a blacksmith shop. And if you wanted to know where that area was, it would be like Eilers and Sickinga.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
Eilers and Sickinga. Job's son Nathan followed in his footsteps and set up a blacksmith shop where the weather vane is located now. Again, notice this is different material than what we've seen before. Am I saying this is white bronze material?
No, that's a marble. This would be the white bronze right here.
Okay. Okay.
James J. Dalton. It's considered an obelisk with crosses on the four corners. And I would consider that an urn, which has meaning. Anyway, James J. Dalton was a member of a very early prominent family. He was born in November 1825 in County Roscommon in Ireland. He immigrated to the United States in 1832 with his family, settling first in St. Joseph and then near Grand Rapids, where they built a mill. In 1846, Captain Dalton and his brother Edward came to Whitelake and built the Silver Creek Mill. He married Emily Burroughs around 1860 and they had 3 children. Captain James Dalton died on 23rd of March 1885 in Montague at the age of 59. His wife was born in Wisconsin in 1840, was one of 7 children. After Captain Dalton died, she moved to Aberdeen, Washington, where she lived with her daughter. Emily died there in October of 1937. The picture that we have of James was taken around 1858 when he was elected state legislator of Ottawa County, and he served on the Harbors Committee for 1 term. He was 33 years old at the time.
That would have been when this county was part of Ottawa County, right?
Yeah, and the reason he got elected, this is my family plot here, so we could spend forever here. My parents are right there. A couple of brothers over there. He was elected, Ottawa County went all the way up almost, I think, to where Oceana County is. So this was all part of it, and there was a big controversy about creating Muskegon County out of part of it. And the people from the northern part of this county, including James Dalton, Carleton, some of those people, did not want that to happen because the lumbering was here, lumbering was in Muskegon, and lumbering was in Grand Haven. The people in Grand Haven were more than happy to have Muskegon go away. So he got elected to the state legislature along with, and I wish I could remember his name, somebody from Ottawa County who's well known, in order to stop that. So they took office in January of 1859, and I think Muskegon County was created in February. So there's a whole story there. It was controversial, very political. And this plot, Emma Mason was James Dalton's niece. So her father and 4 other siblings are in the Whitehall Cemetery. And this is my grandparents, my great-grandparents. Around on the other side is my great-great-grandparents with various others. All of my dad's there with my mother and his 3 brothers, and their wives are all here. So there's a lot of family here. And my 3rd great-grandparents are just over there.
So way in the back is Jerry. Jerry, would you raise your hand? Would you raise your hand? Okay. Jerry looked up the symbol that was back on that obelisk, or that one back there. You want to tell him what it means?
It's for the Knights Templar. And
Nations.
the Latin translates as, "In this sign you will conquer."
Interesting.
So again, as we're going through here, you'll see some pictures. We didn't have pictures of everybody because they wouldn't stand still. No, I'm kidding. We didn't have pictures of everybody, but in the website will be the pictures that are at least shown tonight. This is an example of a family area where they would put a big tombstone for the family, and then put little markers for each of the people. And again, as we're going through here, some of the, I'm going to call it tombstones, might be facing, I'm going to just say facing the wrong direction. They're not
Different
really,
direction.
but they're at the western side of the body, so that the body is facing east. And if you remember the scriptures in the Bible, it says Jesus is going to split the eastern sky, and so that we're doing that. The next place we're going to go is not on your map. I'll explain that when we get there, but it's right up,
Just across the road.
right up here across the road.
This is the grave of Mary Burr, B-U-R-R. She was born in 1856. We don't know exactly where. There's not much history on her. She died in 1883 as a result of a house fire. And she was taking care of a family of small children at the time, and 3 of the
She was taking care of a family, and was a, if I have to go back a little bit, there was a trustee lodge that bought a group of plots. The trustee lodge disbanded in the 40s, and the city reclaimed some of those lots. You're probably standing on a couple people, but don't worry about that, they don't know. But they were put in there, but there's no names to go back and find out who they were. She is going to, like you said, she's going to be a nanny to the people that we're going to visit at the next site. And for a time, she was a housekeeper for Moses Burke family, which lived in Shelby. And then she was hired as a girl, as a nanny for Peter and Mary Deloue. And again, she perished with 3 of the kids in the as we're looking up information, we were not able to find any information, what kind of fire or any report of the fire or anything like that. So we've told you everything we know. When we were at the last grave where we talked about Mary Bird, she was the nanny for Delia. The 3 kids perished and they're buried here. Their names were Evelyn, Nellie, and baby boy. I don't know if he was so young, maybe he didn't have a name yet. If you notice on the top of here, again, we've tried to pick tombstones that maybe had a different symbol, or maybe it was people that were interesting. If you notice on here, there's you don't see it because it's been broken off. There's a hand there with finger pointing up. Okay.
I use this finger.
Again, just maybe as you're thinking about your own burial, maybe you want to think what kind of material that you get a tombstone out of, just so that it happens. Again, there's something unusual here in that there's a little plaque and it has the letters FLT. We tried to find out what that meant, but I don't know what it is. If anybody knows, we'd be glad to hear. Okay, you know as much as we do, so your homework is to go back and find that out. Now at this time...
Down at the bottom, is that where it's at, FLT?
FLT, it's right kind of in the letters. At this time I would like to introduce the city manager, and if you take a look to the east, you'll find the receiving vault that was used for several years to hold bodies during the winter. And he's going to talk about the restoration and how you might be able to help. His name is Jeff.
Hi everybody. So first a little history. So in 1920, Mayor Lohman talked about the Cemetery Improvement Association. So 1920, April of 1920, the Ladies Cemetery Improvement Association had a meeting. Not only was that to elect their trustees for that board, also they were looking at what to do in the cemetery, and there was a need for a receiving vault. So at that time they decided they would start to raise funds for a receiving vault. So that's what this is, basically to take bodies during the time of the year, so in the winter when they couldn't bury them. So they were trying to raise $1,700 for that vault. To give you an idea of how that relates to costs today, as far as construction, that would be over $27,000, but that was still a good deal if you look at what it's going to cost us to repair what's happened there. So over the last couple of years, so it's 104 years old this last April. Last year we started working on the building. It was painted white, kept being painted over several years, but it's a block building, so it absorbs moisture, pushes the paint off. There had been several repairs, so we actually power washed it to see what needed to be done, and in doing that last year, we realized how bad shape it was. So I went through the process of getting a mason out here to look at it, and so he kind of gave us a quote to just repair the block. There's multiple things that need to be done to the building, so not just the block, which he's now done, and it was pretty extensive. If you look kind of straight on from me, you'll see a kind of white line that runs down the side of the building. So the building actually had a stress fracture on both sides of the building because when they built it, they didn't put a solid foundation underneath it. So as parts settled, the building was tilting backwards and separating the block. So he put in a kind of a a relief or a stress gap in the building, basically cut it all the way through, kind of re-poured and replaced block all along the roof line, because over time, as those blocks deteriorated, they would pull out what was cut block, what are those called, Roger? Cut block masonry. So it's to mimic look like of a cut block, but it's actually a cement block that was made locally, and just replace it with a normal block. And so it lost a lot of its character as well. So replaced all those because the mason, as he was doing repairs on houses in the area or they were torn down, would take those and keep them for such restorations. So now it's all original, not original to the building, but original to the area. It's been re-tuck pointed, and then we were looking at painting it again. And then we actually talked with the paint consultant. They said, don't paint it, just seal it, because it needs to actually breathe. So we're still going through the process. Eventually we'll have to replace the roof, do some interior improvements. Right now the building's used basically for storage of things happening in the cemetery. So we're no longer storing bodies in there. But they did fairly recently, probably within 20 years ago?
Probably 20 years, yeah.
20 years ago they were still receiving bodies when they couldn't be buried. So it used to have racking in there that would keep the bodies throughout the winter, and when they could actually bury them, they would bring them out to the cemetery. So now it's just used for storage. You can see it used to have windows on the side, both sides. As you drive down Dowling, it has a metal gate. It used to have wood doors that were behind there. So that's been replaced just by a garage door for right now. It was used for the office, right? Cemetery office for a little bit.
There was a small makeshift office in there prior to the building being down there.
So our intent is to just kind of restore the character and the nature of the building. It's estimated that it's going to cost us about $35,000 to restore. We've put about 10 into just the block work, so we're on our way. So of course we're looking for always funds, fundraiser. Interesting connection, so when they did the first fundraising, they needed $1,700. So I published an article that they were going to build this building. A couple weeks later they published another article that they had some funds from one donor, Elizabeth Rowe of Lansing. So there was a local connection between Elizabeth and Lansing. You want me to talk about that, or do you want to talk about this?
No, you go ahead.
I go ahead. Okay. So the connection was to Mrs. Anna Dowling. So Dowling, right here, Dowling Street. So Anna Dowling was born in 1848, died in 1921. In 1875, she married George E. Dowling. So there was the connection. Anna had an older sister, Elizabeth Wilson, and in 1863 she married Samuel H. Rowe, and they lived in Lansing. As both men were deceased, by 1909 that left the sisters, single ladies, free to visit each other often. So here we have sisters that are related, one in Lansing, one in here. The one sister that was here was heavily involved in the Improvement Association, and so sister, who also had money, donated a large contribution to get the building started.
So Jeff mentioned a generous gift from Mrs. Elizabeth Rowe of Lansing. If you look at there, the only name on the plaque is hers.
So there's one plaque on the front that talks about the Ladies Improvement Association, that they raised funds and built this building. That's just her name that's on there. So it must have been fairly significant.
So as we came over here, some of you stopped, excuse me, my mistake, you stopped by Angela Hawk's grave, and we're going to head back towards that. It's right back here.
Can I say one thing? There's a tree out there called, it's Amelanchier, it's called the serviceberry, and I was asking about it, and it got its name because in the springtime it's one of the first smaller trees to bloom like the dogwood. It's about that size. And when it's blooming, it's called the serviceberry because that's about the time things thawed out enough where we could take these people and bury them, have services. So, yeah. But now with global warming, we're going to change that.
And that marker stands for the Order of the Odd Fellows.
Okay.
And FLT is Friendship, Love, and Truth.
Thank you. What would we do without Google? mentioned to Steve that he said he would leave these markers up here for a few days, so if you want to come back and visit these graves or maybe somebody else's.
Okay, here we have Angela B. Hawks, who was born in 1876 and died in 1877, and her brother Robert Hawks, who was born in 1867 and died in 1869.
So again, what we tried to do was pick out some graves, not necessarily because of people, but because of symbols on here. And if you look at, come up and look at the symbol, there's a symbol of a rose there and a symbol of a lamb. And again, if you look at your picture, probably on the back of your page, or way on the back of your handout, it will tell you what those symbols mean. Angela died of scarlet fever, and Barb already mentioned when she died. Robert died of congestion chills. Anybody want to guess what that is?
Cold.
Malaria.
Malaria.
Okay? It was listed as congested chills. I guess they didn't know how to spell malaria yet. So right next we're going to go to this grave. It's very close. The next four of them that we're going to look at are real close to each other.
Barb?
15 days.
It's like a competition when they write it out like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Except I don't know.
So again, there's a picture on the bottom of this grave, and we'll pick it up and put it back on the table when we go back for refreshments. But if anybody wants to guess who this is?
Mr. Bennett.
No, he's standing there.
Yeah.
Methodist minister.
Go ahead, say his name.
Deacon Abner Bennett. He was born the 22nd of June, 1799 in New York. He was the county's first black lay preacher who came from Canada and was appointed leader of the Whitelake Area Methodist Episcopal Church in 1853 at the Mouth Settlement. From his farm near the Old Channel, he spread the gospel throughout the pioneer settlement of West Michigan, which included small congregations as far north as Little Point Sauble, as far south as Muskegon, and possibly as far east as Newaygo. He married a woman named Mary Ann, and it's believed that they have 2 children, a daughter Julia and a son named George. Abner died on the 3rd of September in 1879 at the age of 80. Mary was reported as a former, Mary's history, we think, was she was a former servant for the President James K. Polk. She was an extensive traveler with being the lady's maid, being Polk's wife's maid, and let's see, she was about 60. She was Mary died in 1899, and she was 74 years old. This has a representation of an urn on it, which I lost my page now.
So Barb just mentioned, and again, if you want to look on the back of your page, of your handout, it has a picture of an urn on it. And again, we didn't necessarily pick it out for people, but for symbols that were here. Again, this is a different types of stone. And I think I mentioned it back in one of those other places. The family, for the most part, is responsible for taking care of the stones. And it even falls under your insurance, your household insurance.
His wife's not buried here then?
Pardon me?
His wife isn't buried here?
I believe so.
She is, there's no marker for her.
Oh, okay.
If there is, it could have been a small marker similar to something like this right here that has been disintegrated.
She lived longer than her daughter did, so there wouldn't have been anybody.
Nobody left behind to take care of it. So, one thing I would like to mention, I don't know how many people have family members or in the family there may be stones like this. This one actually has been cleaned up somewhat. If you compare this one to how this one back here looks, you can see the amount of growth that's on here. You can buy it online or in the monument companies down in Muskegon. It's a spray called D2. You don't really have to clean it up a whole lot. You might want to get some of the excessive growth off of it. But if you spray that, and we sprayed this over a year ago, it's been slowly, continually to clean up on its own. There's a couple of them you'll notice where we've done that here. I think the next stone that we're going to go to has been done as well.
So the next stone that we're going to go to is right back that direction. This is Frank Morton, and I believe in your handout it spells M-U-R. If you look up this, find a grave, it's M-O-R-D-E-N. If you notice on the top, and again, thinking about the different kinds of stones, that's a lamb on top, but it's been worn off quite a bit. Frank came here, he was born in 1850. He was the first minister to move into the Ferry Presbyterian Church parsonage.
He was the son of the first ministers.
The son of him? Okay, all right. Go ahead, whatever else you got there.
Frank Murden died when he was 5 years old, and he was buried somewhere. His father became the first minister at the Presbyterian Church, and after the father arrived, he had his son brought here because they were living here. I don't know where he was before then, but anyway. The interesting thing, and the church was completed in 1875, as was the parsonage that the Reverend Murden and his wife lived in. He bought the property, records indicate that he bought the property in 1878. So it's a little bit confusing how he was buried one place, brought over here, buried in a plot 3 years before the dad owned the plot. But gentlemen's agreements always took place, and I'm not sure who owned the area at the time, but they probably said, my son, I want to bring him over here and bury him. So they said, okay, you can use this plot. He also had a son, William, who died in 1877, and a daughter who died in March of 1878. There was a little clip in the newspaper that said that Reverend Murden had ordered a tombstone for his son, William. But we don't know where it is. And we don't know where the daughter is. And the wife died in December of 1888, and the paper said, and a large group of family and friends followed the remains to their final resting place. We don't know where that is. Benjamin died in Montague, Reverend Benjamin Morton, died in Montague the 14th of April, 1891. But we don't know where he's buried.
So we have 3 more sites to do, and 2 of them are right over here, and then we're working our way down towards the mausoleum.
Here we have Corporal John Heron.
Oh no. So John was born in Switzerland, and he came to America around 1851. He settled in Calumet, and then he moved to Montague to the Claybanks area. He enlisted in the in the military in 1861. He was captured, 1862. He was captured in 1863. He escaped and he was recaptured in 1864. While he was in prison, he died. Not sure why he died. This is not really his actual burial site. His actual burial site is in Anderson National Cemetery in Georgia. While we're talking about this, if you were a family and you bought a big plot of area and you decided you wanted to sell, or not use all those area, it would actually, I'm going to call it, after some work, go back to the city to be resold. However, everyone in your family may have to sign off. And if they don't like each other, you may have to go to court to get everybody to sign off. When we get back by the refreshments and we start asking questions, somebody might want to ask about a green burial. Somebody might want to ask about burying ashes. And again, if you go to the city, there are some plots in here And down where we parked, that's all new area down there, so there are other plots down there. The fee schedule is available on the city website. If you turn around, will be our next person that we're going to talk about.
This is Brian Eugene Dawson. It was designed to sit and reflect, rest. Brian was born in May of 1953 in Shelby. He grew up in Ferry, Michigan, being raised by his grandmother, Louise Dawson. He married Patty Sieber in Whitehall in '74. He was head of Parks and Cemetery for the city of Montague for close to 20 years, from which he took great pride in keeping the city beautiful. Brian was passionate about his first car, which was a '68 Shelby Ford Mustang GT 350. He enjoyed running and traveling with the family. Most of all, enjoyed spending time with his family, especially the grandchildren. He passed away April 2014 at the age of 60.
When you signed in tonight, we asked you to look at a big map because there was 3 things that were maybe a little bit unusual on that big map. And let me hold this map up here. You can maybe hold one side. Did anybody find the 3 unusual things? Well, let me point out one right here. The road goes out to that corner. And that's exactly where it was supposed to be at one time, but the road has changed. And when we get down to the next site, we'll see that the road has changed also. If you look kind of behind me, and I know it's kind of hidden a little bit, we put a flag kind of right out there in that area. There was a gazebo here. And if you would look almost south from that gazebo, there was a pit toilet out there. I'm not going to tell you who's buried there, but the joke is that they're buried in the pit toilet. As we were picking out places to visit tonight, and obviously we couldn't visit everybody. We probably didn't get all your relatives, but we found some that had different tombstones or different people to talk about. This is
my great-grand aunt and uncle, Henry and Mary Moritz. They were both born in Germany. They came to New York where they got married. They moved to Chicago to live for a number of years. And they came to the Montague area in 1902. They bought a house in Maple Grove area. And Mary is my grandmother's aunt. And my grandmother and grandfather and my dad and his siblings came from Chicago to visit Uncle Henry and Aunt Mary. Mostly Aunt Mary because Uncle Henry died in, he died in 1918. They came to visit the Moritz family. When Aunt Mary died, she gave the house to my grandmother. They had been living in Chicago. They moved, the family came to this area in 1935. And it probably, I don't know exactly when they started naming streets, but there's a street at the end of Pine Street off of Old Channel Trail. And if you drive down Pine Street to the end, I think it goes both ways, the street. The house on the left, the last house, was my grandmother's and my great aunt. And they were getting to the point where they had to name names, and because my grandparents were the only ones living on the street at the time, they won by default. So it's Bedow Street.
Bedow?
Yes, Bedow.
So again, you'll see a picture leaning up here. We'll take these pictures and put them back on the tables as we do the refreshments. And again, as we get back there, we'll ask, you're welcome to ask any kind of questions you want. We have one more site to look at, and it's down in front of the mausoleum. So again, we have a picture here, and we'll put that back on the table. Do you want to mention the names?
Joseph Alexander Sidoni.
Joseph was born in February of 1877 in Germany. He came as a child to the United States. He lived in Kalamazoo and he lived in Chicago for a while. He discovered what he claimed to have psychic abilities, and he helped the police solve some many crimes. He married Mary in Wisconsin in 1906, and they moved to Montague. And if one of our tours in the last couple of years, if you remember, was called the Valley of the Pines. It's an 80-acre estate. Then Mary, his wife, was born in Kentucky. She was a member of the Eastern Star. So again, this concludes what we have picked out. We have refreshments back there. We're going to put our pictures back there. And if we can kind of gather together, then maybe we can ask questions so that everybody could hear.